Senior senator from Colorado, currently on the campaign trail in Manchester, New Hampshire, of course, running for the Democratic nomination for president. He's a member of the Senate Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Let me belabor a metaphor here to start. You're a prospective juror. You're in the jury waiting room, let's say. There are no restrictions, so far as I know, on what you're able to read or watch or listen to. In fact, you're able to talk about the case at hand as well. With that out of the way, what did you hear over these last 2 weeks? What's your sense of how things have progressed now that these hearings have concluded?
Well, what we heard was very consistent testimony from extremely well-regarded public servants that the President of the United States shook down a foreign leader to try to get them to intervene in the 2020 election. This, by the way, having completely ignored the fact that the Russians attacked our 2016 election and then tried to deflect that by suggesting that it was the Ukrainians that were involved in it. So he's up to his old tricks. This is what he's been doing since the last time he ran for president. And what I hope comes out of all of this at the end of the day is a reassertion by the American people of the importance of the rule of law and the fact that nobody, including the president, is above the rule of law.
Senator Bennet, you have members of that committee calling for an ethics investigation, other lawmakers as well, in light of what we've learned or what's been reported about Devin Nunes, the ranking member. Your reaction to that, what you think needs to happen here as a result of what we've seen in the pages of the Washington Post, what we've seen on NBC News and elsewhere?
Well, I have to say, it had to be one of the most pathetic moments in modern American history to see that poor member of the Foreign Service having to point out to members of Congress that they had been spewing Russian propaganda for the last 2 years. I'm on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, and I can't talk about the specifics that I've learned there, but it is extremely clear, crystal clear, that the Russians have been trying to manipulate our democracy, that they did it in 2016, that they're still trying to do it, and that this whole notion of the Ukraine being involved was a cover story invented by Putin that's now being repeated by people like Devin Nunes. So I can't comment on the House Ethics Committee. I don't have a view on that. I can comment on how pitiful it is that we've got elected leadership in this country today who, instead of acting in the national security interests of the United States, are basically doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin. And by the way, that is the reason why Donald Trump needs to be a one-term president. We have a lot of other reasons as well, but the fact that Putin would like him to stay, China would like him to stay, Iran would like him to stay, because it just benefits their position in the world to have somebody in the White House who spends all weekend watching cable television and tweeting out to America instead of actually taking care of the business that the American people need him to conduct.
Charlene Maxwell, picking up on that, for the Republicans at least, the Longworth House office building being a fact-free zone where facts are in dispute.
Right.
That was, as the senator said, an astonishing moment when you had Dr. Fiona Hill really taking these Republicans to task. It was also amazing to see the Republicans trying to preempt that when they got their hands on her opening statement to sort of say that she was in fact wrong about what they've been saying all along. But to this point, not losing sight of, yes, what was in the Mueller report, but what we know of Russian disinformation, yes, in 2016, but at present, and what we're likely to see here is a move to 2020.
So the big fear that I have is that we haven't adequately dealt with the attack that happened before. And Mueller told us that there is an attack currently happening. They're continuing to do this. We see bots and other activity in our social media spaces, just like we saw in 2016. I mean, just anecdotally, I remember seeing that and not knowing at the time what I was seeing. Why am I seeing people who look like they're Black Bernie supporters calling Hillary? Like, why am I seeing all of this activity? Now I understand. And so I think going into the next election, we have to understand that what Donald Trump is alleged to have done is cheat in the next election. And part of this, the propaganda that the Republicans are repeating, the social media activity, and also his shakedown of Ukraine are all part of the same narrative. And the narrative and the through line is that the integrity of the election that is coming up is not 100% certain. We're not sure that it's going to be fair.
Senator Bennet, let me ask you about the clip that we played at the beginning of this segment. I said I was going to bookend it here with that, and that is the former vice president talking about Senator Lindsey Graham and what he said, what he's agitating for, how he's so persistent about this specious investigation continuing. What do you make of that? What do you make of seeing your two former colleagues there, two former senators there, at loggerheads here, in a place that is so unlike what we saw just a few years ago?
Well, what I make of it is that we need a new generation of leadership in Washington, D.C. These battles are doing nothing for the people that I represent in, Colorado or across the country, the kids I used to work for in the Denver public schools, or all the people in America that have lost health insurance as a result of Donald Trump failing to keep his promises. And they expect better of our elected leadership. To see Lindsey turn around the way he has is almost inexplicable. To see the Freedom Caucus, which came to Washington to mobilize our exercise in self-government, now become the Donald Trump Republican Party. We are seeing our democracy at risk, and that's what's at stake in this election, I believe. And that's why I'm continuing to run, because I think that I am best situated to beat Donald Trump in a general election, because I come from a swing state, and we've got to win some purple states in order to beat President Trump and get a majority that can make the United States Senate work again for the American people. We have had a decade of this, and another decade of this is going to mean that my generation of Americans is going to be the first generation to leave less opportunity, not more, to the people coming after us. That is shameful, particularly because it's so unnecessary. We have a guy in the White House who's acting like he's in charge of his own reality TV show every single day, but it's the American people's reality, and it's our place in the world that's being squandered. I know that it makes for good television, but it makes for a lousy position for this country going forward, and it's not the country that I want to turn over to my kids or the next generation. So I hope that everybody, no matter what their view is on this, is that they get to the polls and they make sure that we vote, that this is a one-term presidency, and that we begin to govern the country again, not for the interests of people in Washington, but for the people all over the country that actually would like to see an economy that, when it grows, it benefits them, not just the people at the very top. That's not that complicated.
Senator, thank you very much. That's Senator 2020 presidential candidate Michael Bennet there on the Kafkaesque transformation of his colleague Lindsey Graham and the transformation of the Democratic Party as well. Joining us from Manchester, New Hampshire today. Thank you very much. Still ahead, on up, new reaction.